As you likely know at this point, a Reddit forum with 2 million subscribers revived GameStop's stock this week, betting it up from just a few dollars months ago to more than $300 by Wednesday. That move sent crushing losses to short-selling hedge funds on Wall Street, and a lot of elites are very, very mad.
That's right. So joining us to discuss exactly how that forum, Wall Street Bet, sent GameStop shares to the moon is Bloomberg News reporter Brandon Cockton. Brandon, great to see you. Thanks for joining us, man.
Yep. Thanks for having me.
Brandon, you wrote kind of the definitive piece before this all exploded. I actually used it here a couple of times. So we wanted to make sure we could have you on the show and actually explain exactly how this happened. Can you start from the beginning, from your perspective, around where the GameStop short idea even came from, and who were the first Redditors and others, so to speak, to point out what was happening with the hedge funds?
Yeah, so I mean, the idea of shorting GameStop is kind of just part of the narrative of the death of brick and mortar retail. Mm-hmm. And you know, that pushed the stock price down for years, among other things. I mean, operational issues and things like that. But that was one of the reasons the stock's been falling for years now. What sort of happened, though, is you had people on Reddit, you had famous investors like Michael Burry, famously from The Big Short, who looked at the stock price, looked at the fundamentals and said, wait, this company's not going bankrupt, at least now. It might at some point, but it's not going bankrupt now. It has enough cash. It has enough revenue. It'll stick around. And so I think what people have missed in this is, these Redditors are smart people. They've done their research. I mean, if you looked at the things that they were saying, and if you had put it on a hedge fund letterhead as opposed to an internet message board, you would have just been like, wow, that makes sense. That's a smart idea. Mm-hmm. And so they laid out that case, and for a while, people were making fun of them on Reddit. Like, it wasn't like all of a sudden everyone was like, okay, we're in. People were very skeptical. People were still doing due diligence. But people thought there was an idea here, and they got some backing from a famous investor, and, not backing, but, had confidence that another famous investor was in on this.
Yeah.
And so when did it really start to take off then?
Yeah. So there's like 2 or 3 things here, but, one, you have this famous guy, Deep Effing Value, and, you can
he's a multimillionaire now. Yeah.
He very much is. And, he's the one that, sort of showed the goods, right? He showed he had like $50,000 worth of options that they'd already doubled. And so this is the first person where it's like, wow, there's someone on here who believes in this and they're putting real money behind it. Fast forward a bit, you get people starting to make the argument of like, look, there's a ton of hedge funds betting against this. And if you believe in the fundamental analysis, that's one thing. But if you think that they are really going to last, as the fundamental analysis would predict, there's going to be this second coming. And that's hedge funds, people betting against this stock are going to have to cover their bets. And that's going to send it to the moon. And so that starts to pick up, last spring. Last summer, Ryan Cohen, the famous founder of Chewy, who's a billionaire, he invests in GameStop. So there you go. You have another point of confidence, another famous person, someone who's really made it in the market, who's involved. And, it's basically started taking off since September. I mean, nothing like this, but, this month Cohen got named to the board, and, here we are, explosion.
Yeah, it's really interesting here in terms of the background. So now that we are moving forward, Brandon, obviously I just want to get your reaction to kind of the Robinhood shutdown and more. What are you hearing and seeing in terms of how this will change the Wall Street landscape forever? I saw that one of the firms that you mentioned, I think it's Citron Research, who was publishing some of the short documents, they said this morning they will never be publishing short research ever again. Can you break that down for the audience? What does that mean?
I mean, it's astounding. I mean, Andrew Left is one of the most famous short sellers of all time. And he, because of this incident, is basically saying, I don't want to deal with this anymore.
Wow.
There's obviously, short sellers writ large are now being hunted. Mm-hmm. What we're seeing is people are moving and looking at other stocks now that are heavily shorted. And look, those stocks might be heavily shorted for very good reasons. And that's kind of a scary thing to just invest based on that premise alone. But it's certainly woken up the short sellers. I mean, the Citron point is just proof of that. And so, there's wide-ranging ramifications here. And it could be that, one, people are afraid to short stocks from now on. I mean, it could be that, hedge funds won't short small market cap stocks where retail investors can have an outsized sort of presence. And, but one of the things I keep thinking is the sort of second order thing here might be hedge funds now might be a little bit more interested in those small market cap stocks because of retail piling in. And also the idea, well, one of the fears before was it doesn't take much of a short bet to sort of hold those stock prices down. Mm-hmm. If no one's going to do it now, why not? Like, what's the risk?
Yeah. And what have you made of the political reaction? You see AOC and Ted Cruz and Mike Lee and Sherrod Brown and all these people jumping on the bandwagon. What do you make of all of that?
I mean, who would have ever thought that the thing that would unite the right and left would have been GameStop shares? It is. I mean, you couldn't write this. I mean, you couldn't make this up. I mean, it's truly amazing. I mean, when you have Ben Shapiro and AOC both saying the same exact thing, like, what world are we living in? Like, what has happened here? I mean, hell has frozen over.
Yeah. Very interesting.
Truly amazing. Thank you, Brandon. Really appreciate your analysis, man.
Yeah, great to have you.
And
Thank you.
Great reporting.
Thank you.
Coming up front of the show, David Sirota is going to talk about the $2,000 promise that Dems made that may soon be history, or at least it's been sort of steadily negotiated down and pushed off, et cetera, et cetera. That One Rising continues.